Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. This is Budget Day in Alberta, and the Alberta Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation says the province needs to help Albertans with more tax breaks. A third teenager has pleaded not guilty in Lethbridge to the sexual assault of a 16-year-old high school football player. And a major concern has been raised by a researcher with the Montreal Economic Institute over the Trudeau government's national pharmacare legislation.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Well, this is Budget Day in Alberta, and it looks like a fairly lean one. Premier Daniel Smith has told Finance Minister Nate Horner to keep spending increases beneath the rate of inflation and population growth. Smith says that can be done without major cuts or new taxes. She's also made it known that the province will be focusing on investing more into the Heritage Savings Trust Fund and not putting all of our eggs into the energy basket. Finance Minister Nate Horner shares more of the details of the budget, which includes a 4.4% increase in the Health Department's budget.
It's a budget that strikes a balance. It addresses the needs of Alberta families, builds and protects safe communities, manages our resources wisely, and supports businesses that are the backbone of our economy. At the same time, it's built on our fiscal framework, which ensures paying down debt remains a priority. This is a budget based on the same priorities held by many Albertans who create their own household budgets. Albertans who have also had to make tough choices to take care of the needs of the family, make their mortgage payments, and hopefully save for the future. Budget 2024 is a responsible plan that invests in the public services that Alberta families and communities rely on, like strong health care and education.
The Canadian Taxpayers Federation has been calling on the Alberta government to cut income taxes, especially since a large surplus was anticipated.
What we really want to see in this year's budget, Hal, is the promised income tax cut. Now, folks might remember back when the UCP was in the middle of their election campaign in 2023, they promised us a lower income tax bracket. Now, that can sound really boring, but it's not, because if they did it, it would save us a lot of money. The UCP did the math, and they said that it would save the average Alberta worker more than $700 per person per year. If you look at it this way, our income tax bracket is at 10%, and it goes all the way up to like $140,000 something per person. That's pretty high. It's quite a bit higher than British Columbia's provincial income tax rate. So that's the main thing that we're looking ahead for here in the budget.
A third teenager has pleaded not guilty in a sexual assault case involving a 16-year-old from Chinook High School here in Lethbridge. The accused, who are all 16 and 17 years of age and were part of a football team, are being charged with sexual assault with a weapon, and forcible confinement. The Crown asked for a charge against a fourth teenager be downgraded, and that person has been referred to a diversion program. Police say a 16-year-old football player was assaulted in a locker room at the high school after regular school hours last October. Federal Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre blasted the Trudeau government on a security breach at a Winnipeg lab, a lab where some of the world's most dangerous viruses are studied and handled. Poilievre says documents he received revealed a cover-up where the Chinese government infiltrated one of the federal government's top virology labs.
We have learned that the Trudeau government's head of pathogens was collaborating with members of Beijing's People's Liberation Army who are responsible for bioweapons and bioterrorism. We know now that a People's Liberation Army official was able to gain personal access, walk in the door, look at computers, and have access to all of our most important virological secrets. If you think any of this is hyperbole, read the report yourself. This is from government documents, the Trudeau government's own documents. It says here on page 142, Winnipeg lab scientist Dr. Chu is head of the Special Pathogens Unit, the top person in that job. According to documents on page 242, quote, represents a serious and credible danger to the Government of Canada as a whole, and in particular at facilities considered high security due to the potential for theft of dangerous materials attractive to terrorists and foreign entities that conduct espionage to infiltrate and damage the economic security of Canada, end quote.
Federal Health Minister Mark Holland says the newly released records about the firing of 2 scientists show a lax adherence to security protocols. The records show the scientists lost their jobs after security reviews found they failed to protect sensitive assets and information.
Since that period of time, extraordinary effort has been taken to ensure that nothing like it ever occurred will occur again, and those protocols are well in place. I think it's important, before I get into talking about the ad hoc committee process, just to talk about taking us back to 2019 and to the moment in time that we were in that. From the threat environment with respect to foreign interference was in a very different place at that moment in time. I think there was a nascent understanding of the extent to which foreign actors, in the most direct sense, China, and we're talking in this instance, in other instances Russia and other foreign entities, and foreign governments were attempting to influence Canada. And while there were the proper protocols in place, there was a lax adherence to the securities and protocols that were in place that, as I said, were unacceptable.
Both Alberta and Quebec have decided to opt out of the bill that is meant to pave the way for national pharmacare. Now, the bill tabled by Federal Health Minister Mark Holland also includes a program to cover birth control and diabetes drugs and supplies for anyone with health care. Holland says the program will cost around $1.5 billion, but that will likely change over the course of negotiations with provinces.
I want to say Adriana Lagrange and I really work very well together. We've built a very strong relationship. We worked through the Working Together Agreement, and we're able to announce that in December. We're very soon going to be announcing the Aging with Dignity Agreement. I think there's a lot of people who thought maybe we couldn't get that done. And I had a very productive conversation with Adriana on this. And from a person, I don't want to infer anything to her. I would just say, from my perspective, that conversation leads me to believe that we can find answers, we can find solutions. We want to make sure that every Canadian, and certainly every Albertan, has access to universal contraceptives and to the diabetes medication they need.
You know, there's been a lot of concern raised over the Trudeau government's pharmacare bill, which has been tabled. Now, according to a researcher with the Montreal Economic Institute, the legislation could lead to lower quality coverage. Emmanuel Faubert, an economist at MEI, says there's a good chance the federal pharmacare plan could lower coverage quality for millions of Canadians who rely on private insurance companies for their prescription medication.
There's a really high risk of a reduction in the quality of coverage. And what we mean by quality of coverage is the number of medications that are covered. Because if you look across Canada, private insurance programs really cover a lot more medications than the public provincial programs. So if we have a monopoly in buyers, because right now they want to buy in bulk these new medications, so when you have only one program, public, there's this risk of having a lower number of medication covered. And if you look into the RAMQ, which is the most generous public program across Canada, even then there's 21.5 million Canadians who have access right now to a greater coverage. So you're putting at risk the quality of coverage for a great number of Canadians.
Jeanette Rocher is now with a quick peek at the forecast here in southwestern Alberta. Jeanette, it was great being above zero again today, but colder temperatures with more snow may be on the way for our region once again fairly soon.
Yeah, and right when we're used to this beautiful weather again, and doesn't that always seem to happen to us? So unfortunately, yeah, there's some bad news because we are seeing that drastic drop in temperature. Beginning this evening, we're going to see an overnight low of -13. And those southwesterly winds gusting up to 50 will still be gusting this evening, but later this evening will be dying down. As we get into Friday, we're only looking at 15 kilometer/hour wind gusts, but with a daytime high of only -1, that still means wind chill values. And beginning Friday, that's where we're going to start a whole bunch of minus days. So the days of pluses are over, at least for a while. Sorry for the bad news there, but I'll be back later in the show to give you a full look at the weather forecast.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. The coroner's inquest into the death of mass killer Miles Sanderson has heard from a criminal investigative psychologist. Matt Logan thinks Sanderson overdosed on cocaine as he was being taken into custody by police back in September of 2022 and didn't intend to die. Now, Logan told the inquest he believes the man who killed 11 people and wounded 17 others on the James Smith Cree Nation and in the nearby village of Weldon was still on a mission to harm the mother of his kids. Vanessa Burns, who was Sanderson's common law partner, says there was a sense of relief when she heard that Sanderson had died.
I hate to say this, but I was kind of like relieved because he had no remorse on what he did. I don't know, I just felt like if he did live, he would have still been bugging me and stalking me. Impacted me with a lot of emotions. I was triggered when I heard his voice. It brought back a lot of emotions from like September 4th, like the same feelings, how I felt that day. Just seeing the pictures of that day was triggering too.
Federal Immigration Minister Mark Miller says Canada is bringing back visa requirements for people from Mexico due to a spike of asylum claims in recent years. Mexican citizens flying into Canada can apply for an electronic travel authorization if they have held a Canadian visa within the last 10 years or if they have a valid American visa.
In 2023 alone, asylum claims from Mexican citizens accounted for 17% of all claims made that year from all nationalities around the world. Most asylum claims from Mexico are either rejected by the Immigration and Refugee Board of Canada or withdrawn or abandoned by the applicant, and so a change was needed. We've been examining these measures for months. We have seen exponential growth in asylum claims, particularly from Mexican nationals in the last year. This is something that Cabinet has been seized up for some months. Given the relationship that we have with Mexico, it is something that could not be taken precipitously. Measures had to be taken. Our officials at various levels have been going down to Mexico, speaking to officials, talking about the measures. The Prime Minister, every time he has met his counterpart, has raised this issue every time. And we needed to give Mexico, because of our friendship, the chance to rectify things.
Ontario Conservative MP Leslyn Lewis attacked the record of the Trudeau government during question period today. She says after 8 years of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, never have so many Canadians had to turn to food banks.
Common sense Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. After 8 years, this Liberal NDP Prime Minister is not worth the cost, the crime, or the corruption. Never before in the history of this great nation have so many people have to resort to food banks. Thousands are now resorting to dumpster diving because they can no longer afford the cost of food. Will this Prime Minister show some compassion and cancel the April 1st carbon tax hike?
I'm not surprised, though, to hear that member and the Conservatives continue to bring up these points. They want to take money out of the pockets of Canadians. Today, historic legislation tabled in the House of Commons on pharmacare. The Leader of the Opposition ran away when asked if he would support pharmacare. When it comes to student loans and helping students, when it comes to EI, pensions in particular, they're nowhere to be seen. They want to make cuts. They're a party of austerity, Mr. Speaker.
Israel Defense Forces have put together an evacuation plan for Gaza's Rafah region. According to recent reports, it's the last city in the Gaza Strip under Hamas's control. TBN Israel's Yair Pinto says the entire evacuation will take quite a bit of time to evacuate a number of civilians.
After 145 days, the IDF has completed an action plan for Rafah, the last city in the Gaza Strip that is still under Hamas's control. The plan includes evacuation of the civilian population from Rafah, which will take at least 14 days, and Israel will not do this during the Ramadan fast that starts in 2 weeks. That means that it is likely to happen in the middle of April, before the operation in Rafah begins, and the IDF estimates that it will take at least 2 months to complete.
Rising inflation has impacted the Canadian housing market so much that young home buyers are finding it very difficult to afford a home today. Jeff Reimer, real estate agent from Lethbridge, shares what he's observing with some of his younger clients.
The ones that I'm working with, the selection is harder. So, they look and then they get discouraged when the one pops up that they can afford where they want, and it's sold right away or multiple offers. So that is a bit challenging for them, but they've also had to save up their down payment and then qualify at a certain rate. And with the interest rates having gone up, they do qualify for less. So that is a challenge so we're seeing a few more people maybe use a co-signer or buy together or pool their resources to accomplish that. And we're seeing, I saw a case here not long ago where 3 generations were involved in the purchase, the grandparent, the parents, and the kids, so that they can make it happen.
Make sure you catch the entire interview with real estate agent Jeff Reimer and BCN producer Michael Clausen coming up after business news. Well, the warmer temperatures we've been experiencing should be leaving us fairly soon, and there's even a chance of more moisture developing. A full look at the weather pictures on deck. It was another sloppy drive around Lethbridge today. The warmer temperatures have been nice, but very slushy and muddy. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, a lot of that slush, however, should be freezing again tonight, along with a chance of more flurries developing.
Yeah, not a great way to bring in the month of March, is it? Does that mean that March is coming in like a lion? I don't know, maybe. Let's take a look at these temperatures. I'm seeing some minus double digits there, at least for the overnight temperatures for sure, as we dip down to minus 20s, minus 22s overnight this weekend. It looks like it's going to get very cold. So much for that double-digit day that we had today, which was lovely. We're seeing a high of -1 on Friday, down to -13 for both Saturday and Sunday. And yes, the snow should begin Friday night. We're seeing some flurries Friday night, Saturday snow, and then a mix of sun and cloud for the rest of the week. And we're still seeing those minus temperatures as we get into Monday, -9 for a high, -4 on Tuesday, and then up to 0 on Wednesday, which kind of brings us back into that seasonal range. So average high for this time of year, 3 degrees. Average low, -9. 17 was our high temperature that happened back in 1992. And on this day, back in 1976, we had the record low for this day, which was -30. Sun rose this morning at 7:15, sunset at 6:14. Look at that right there. Almost 11 hours. We're looking at 10 hours, 59 minutes of daylight. 4 minutes more light today than we saw yesterday. On the west coast tomorrow, could see a risk of some thunderstorms, particularly here on the island and in the lower mainland. 8 degrees for a high in Victoria, 30% chance of showers, risk of thunderstorms. And then in Vancouver, 60% chance of showers. Could see some flurries in those higher terrain areas and that risk of the thunderstorm. 6 for a high there as well. -13, the daytime high tomorrow in Edmonton. And we're looking at a 30% chance of flurries. Also seeing some periods of snow in Calgary tomorrow, and then a 30% chance of flurries in late afternoon, -9 for a high there. As we get into the rest of the prairies, Saskatoon, we're seeing a -9 for a daytime high, 30% chance of flurries there. Clear skies in Regina, -6, 5 degrees. In Winnipeg, looking fairly lovely there, and we're seeing mainly clear skies as well. As we get into the central part of the country, 8 for a high in Toronto, seeing sunshine, clear skies as well in Ottawa, 5 for a high there, and a high of 0 in Montreal with clearing later on in the day. Getting into Atlantic Canada, Fredericton, -4 for a high, and sunshine. Halifax looking at a 30% chance of flurries, -6 for a high, mix of sun and cloud, and then possibly some flurries later on in the day. -8 for the high in Charlottetown tomorrow. -5 in St. John's, 60% chance of flurry. Also a risk of some snow squalls in that area, and up to 60 winds as well. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
Stats Canada says our country's economy grew at an annualized rate of 1% in the fourth quarter. While high interest rates weighed heavily on growth, it wasn't enough to have the economy slide into a recession. The increase in real gross domestic product comes on the heels of a third quarter decline of 0.5% annualized. The agency says fourth quarter growth was driven by a rise in exports, while investment in housing and business both fell. Chrysler is recalling more than 300,000 Jeep vehicles due to the potential loss of vehicle control. The recall affects certain 2021 to 2023 Jeep Grand Cherokee L and 2022 to 2023 Grand Cherokee vehicles. According to Chrysler, impacted vehicles are prone to losing control due to a steering knuckle separation. Affected vehicles may experience a separation of the upper control arm ball joint from the steering knuckle, which would cause the vehicle and wheel to fall outward, resulting in a loss of control. Owner notifications for repairs are expected to be mailed out on April the 12th. The federal government has agreed to lend millions of dollars to a second green hydrogen project in Atlantic Canada. Ottawa and World Energy GH2 say they've agreed on an agreement for a $128 million credit facility, a business loan similar to a line of credit. The loan comes about 2 months after a similar agreement was made to provide $166 million to Everwin Fuels in Nova Scotia. Both projects are trying to stake a claim as Canada's most advanced green hydrogen plant, though neither has an in-service date on the table just yet. Clean energy is a desire being felt all the way around the world. Now, as Alberta seeks to fill this need, it's being positioned to become a leader in hydrogen production. Dave Vanden Assem, Director of Clean Technology from the Hydrogen Centre of Excellence, shares how hydrogen can be used.
Hydrogen is best used where it's difficult to decarbonize through other means. And we're finding that the most traction we're getting, the most interest and the best opportunities are in transportation, especially heavy freight and commercial freight transportation, such as big trucks and trains. One can also use it for heating in residential and commercial applications. And we also have a tremendous opportunity to provide another low carbon export product because there are other regions around the world that are really interested in our low cost, low carbon intensity hydrogen.
Make sure you catch my full interview with Dave Vanden Assem from the Hydrogen Centre of Excellence coming up later in our show. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 119 points on the day to finish at 21,363. The Dow was up 47 points to 38,996. The S&P 500 was up 26 on the day to 5,096, and the Nasdaq was up 144 points to 16,091. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 30 cents to 78.24 US per barrel. Natural gas was down 4 cents to $1.85 US. Gold was up $8.93 on the day to $2,043.48 US an ounce, and silver was up 21 cents to $22.67 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.16 per bushel, barley's at $5.99, canola's at $13.43, and corn is at $7.39 per bushel. Live cattle were down 95 cents to $184.65. Feeder cattle March contract was down 60 cents to $249, and lean hogs April contract was up 63 cents to $86.63. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.65 US. Recapping one of our top stories, a third teenager has pleaded not guilty in a sexual assault case involving a 16-year-old from Chinook High School here in Lethbridge. The accused, who are all 16 and 17 years of age and were part of a football team, are being charged with sexual assault with a weapon, assault with a weapon, and forcible confinement. The Crown asked for a charge against a fourth teenager be downgraded, and that person has been referred to a diversion program. Police say a 16-year-old football player was assaulted in a locker room at the high school after regular school hours last October. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our new career section on our website and check out the jobs that we have posted there. We're doing some hiring right now.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Henderson Lake Park Run invites all to throw on a pair of runners and participate in a free weekly computer-timed and recorded 5-kilometer walk, jog, or run. The park run is one of 2,100 park runs held around the world. Dogs on leashes and kids in strollers are welcome too. The park run begins at the Kinsman Picnic Shelter at 9 a.m. every Saturday. To register, visit parkrun.ca. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Canada continues to be in a housing crisis, with some markets experiencing a serious shortage of housing. Rising inflation has increased interest rates. Many Canadians, including young married couples, are finding it more difficult to afford a home today. To talk about this in more detail and about the housing market in Alberta is Jeff Reimer. He has been a Lethbridge realtor for 30 years with Royal LePage. Jeff, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hey, nice to chat with you, Michael.
It's great to have you on. Now, recent headlines say overall the average price of a home of all types in Lethbridge have gone up by an astounding 21.9%. And that's over this last year. Now, apparently that is almost double the average price increase across Alberta. Could you tell us some of the factors or reasons behind this massive jump?
Sure. I mean, that statistic is a little bit um, hard to explain exactly, but it's really a snapshot of January, this January over last January's stats. So it is a marked increase, but your average house per se across the board did not go up 22% necessarily. So the statistic is what it is, but um, when you look at the supply and demand issues right now, essentially that's what's driving the prices up. And there's less inventory and people are still moving into Lethbridge, so that's inching the prices up. But the typical house a year ago would not be a full 22% more today necessarily. I mean, some could be close to that, but not all price ranges and not across the board.
Right. So, what's a young couple or a new family coming to Lethbridge an area to do if they're looking to buy something? Where would you suggest that they start?
Well, I mean, definitely get in the market information early and start looking at the data. And depending on your urgency, is if you see something you like, act diligently, but act quickly. Yeah, if you wait, especially in the lower price ranges,
Hmm. Gotcha.
Lethbridge is average and below. The market can be moving pretty quick if it's a good house or a good condominium or semi-detached home,
Right.
and they're moving pretty quick.
So maybe buyers don't have the luxury of location and taking their time. What do you say would be the main factor that those home purchasers are looking for?
The location is huge. Just the other day, I was working with somebody, and their preference was a certain area of Lethbridge, and they did settle for a different area because the home was better, but it wasn't their top choice for location. The Lethbridge being relatively easy to get around in and a quick drive anywhere made it at least possible for them to consider the other options to get in at the price point they needed. So
Right. Now, what about home builders? Is there a lot of new home builds going on in and around Lethbridge?
that's an interesting thing that also affects the stats because year over year, there may not have been the same amount of builders or developers putting their product on the MLS system. So that can skew the numbers as well. Like when I look back at, let's say, a semi-detached home selling for on average this January for 364,000, I can look back that same stat, let's say in January 2021, and say that it was 209,000. Well, that's a drop jaw number difference. But what you're going to find is in certain developments, something like a semi-detached home on the west side of a new construction, geared to a mature buyer, could easily sell for 400, 450 developed. And if that product wasn't on the MLS last year, that's quite the skewed difference. So you got to remember on scale in Lethbridge, because of our numbers, it's a snapshot only. So you really have to look at the entire trend and look at examples year over year, and always just ask your agent for help and counsel on that. They like talking about that and giving advice. So agents are happy to do that.
Yeah. So speaking of agents and that research, can you kind of talk about the heavy lifting that you do for your clients?
Well, every time you spend that much money, you're concerned about how much to pay, right? Whether you've done it before or it's your first time, knowing what price to offer. You look at statistics and you look at past sales in the neighborhood and try to guide them on what a fair price would be. But the past doesn't always dictate the current, right? Especially with supply and demand issues. So you can say, well, your last two neighbors sold 3 months ago for X amount. But if there's nothing on the market and they're up for it today, and there's several people looking for that home, it's not as relevant, right? So you really have to gauge your information and have the agent and the consumer discuss those nuances together candidly, and then say, okay, how urgent is your purchase? What is your budget? What is your primary needs and wants? And then weigh that against their desperation motivation of the buyer and then also of the seller. And that's also going to ring true if a seller, let's say, puts it on the market at 5% below market value to try to get, multiple offers at once. You have to know that. You have to gauge that, because if you come in at what you think last month's stats were, you're going to be SOL. So it's really important to have the buyer and agent discuss those prices, discuss the trends, look at the data, discuss it candidly, before making an offer for all purchase. That's really wise.
Right. So with this inventory being the way that it is right now, are you seeing a lot of multiple offers on properties?
More, certainly. Yeah. If you offer on a place in the first day or two, you're always nervous that there could be another one right behind you if there isn't one on the table already. And then certainly in some cases, like, if they do price it um, at or slightly below market, their goal may very well to be get multiple offers. And then, yeah, you're seeing.
Gotcha. I never thought of that. I guess that could be actually a listing strategy, is to price it so that you actually do get multiple offers. Now, I wanted to ask you, we've been talking about Lethbridge specifically, but are you seeing more people moving to bedroom communities like Tabor or Barnwell or Nobleford?
Absolutely, there's a trend of that. With the interest rates being a little higher, uh, it's to get the same house per se or the same square footage. Yeah, you may not be able to get it in Lethbridge in someone's budget. So they are looking at other places, and places like, yeah, Tabor, Nobleford, Fort McLeod. They're selling quicker in those price points. And what we're finding that the prices are compacting. So when the interest rates are higher, the higher houses are bigger payments. And so people might tend to buy a little more affordable or only qualify for less. And then sellers, when their mortgages come renew here, they're always going to consider whether they need to downsize or lower their expectations for their next house. And then with the demand of new people coming in and the shortage, then the affordable homes are getting pushed up. So you're finding that compacting of the prices. That's a real interesting phenomenon to see, but you're following it when every time you're looking at buying a house, you got to know those trends. And yeah, out of towners definitely. Lethbridge is still a short drive to any of those communities. Within an hour of here. In some big cities, they go an hour to work every day just across the city. So if someone's moving here from BC, Vancouver, Ontario, in comparison, that drive is not as drastic, and it's being considered more and more.
Right. Now, mentioning other provinces, are you seeing a lot of buyers from other provinces coming into southern Alberta?
Yeah, certainly there has been that trend in the last couple of years for sure. Buyers from British Columbia and Ontario, and when they sell a townhouse, for example, at $1 million, and they can come here and buy a really nice house for 500,000 and another revenue property or two with those same funds, it's real enticing for them to consider that. And then if they have young kids, they're going, well, our young kids aren't going to be able to buy in this environment in, let's say, Vancouver if you grew up there. And so they're considering moving to these, especially after COVID too, right? People wanted to get out of the bigger centers. So it's kind of been a trend the last few years. And Alberta, especially southern Alberta, offers a really good options.
Right. And circling back to buyers' choices, are you finding that there are a lot of people maybe buying revenue properties or going into apartments or townhouses instead of a detached house?
Yeah, for sure, because the price per door is less. So, a landlord's going to look at the return on investment, and if they can get in that door for cheaper, the rents are a little higher, right, with inflation. So, as we see the rents increase, that when an owner can put their money into a bond market at such percent, they want to get a reasonable return on their property. So if the rents can sustain that, then yeah, they're buying those up, and it's also putting pressure on the first time market because the landlords are also looking at those. And then Lethbridge is still Lethbridge in southern Alberta, very much a retirement community because we're nice and warm here, and because we're further south. And so you're seeing retirement, we're seeing new home buyers, we're seeing landlords, investment buyers. So, that's putting a lot of pressure on the lower price points, and that's also moving the prices up in those ranges.
So that being said, are you finding that maybe the number of young people buying homes has been decreasing? Are they kind of getting having too much competition then for those houses that they'd qualify for?
Yeah, the exact stat it would hard to put a finger on, but yeah, I would say so because the ones that I'm working with, the selection is harder. So, they look and then they get discouraged when the one pops up that they can afford where they want, and it's sold right away or multiple offers. So that is a bit challenging for them. But they've also had to save up um, their down payment and then qualify at a certain rate. And with the interest rates having gone up, they do qualify for less. So that is a challenge for. So we're seeing a few more people maybe use a cosigner or buy together or pool their resources to accomplish that. And we're seeing, I saw a case here not long ago where 3 generations were involved in the purchase, the grandparent, the parents, and the kids, so that they can make it happen.
Well, that's smart. And that was actually my next question. I was going to ask if you are seeing generations coming together. And can you talk, are there some advantages? There must be advantages to that.
Yeah, and with suites, especially legal suites, where you can get proper insurance and proper conformity with the safety of the city, legal suites have quite a big draw as prices go up in any community, right? So legal suites have done really well in the city because that need for more housing and for affordability and combining, maybe parents on one level, kids on the other is becoming a little bit more common, and a legal suite does that nicely. So the premium on those has been quite rich, and if a builder has taken that step of buying a legal suite or building a legal suite, then the return on that has been reasonable, I think, because of that demand.
Yeah, that's really something to keep in mind. I know you and I have talked in the past about the need to make sure that your suite in the house you're looking at is compliant. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe unpack that, why the buyer needs to pay a little bit more attention to some of those nuances.
Yeah, it's a choice of the risk tolerance of any particular buyer. Ultimate best if everything was perfect according to codes, but there's a lot of illegal suites in Lethbridge. And so much so that a lot of brokerages are requiring their agents to put the words illegal right in the advertisements. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not safe, but they were probably not to code and they may not be safe or they may not have all the elements of safety. So, there's a lot more to it than just the zoning or the application or egress windows, right? There's alarm systems. There's the width of steps. There's proper parking. There's the actual zoning, smoke detectors. Firewall, heat sources, size of windows. It's not just about being able to get out, but firemen are able to get in. So people ask, "Oh, do I just need to do bigger windows?" Well, it's a lot more than that usually. And the city had a program before where you could take non-compliant places if you could prove in the past that they had been rented out and bring them into a safety minimum target with like fire codes and such. And that program, as I understand, has ended so a few years back now. So if you're going to want to make a suite, you're going to be necessary, as I understand it, to bring it up to legal duplex standards, which could mean 2 heating sources and making sure the zoning's proper and everything.
Yeah, well, and even fire blocking. Like there's, in looking at this, you and I have talked about this before, even the liability issue of keeping your tenants safe and wanting what's best for them.
Yeah, if there's a fire, right? You want to make sure that your insurance is going to cover you, and you certainly just don't want a fire, right?
Absolutely.
They're horrible. So you want to avoid that at all costs, and that's why we have codes, right? So
That's
it is
right.
important to follow them. In a perfect world, everything would be legal. So it's something to consider, and to certainly don't hesitate to talk to the city because they're the experts on that. And talk to a contractor, talk to your agent about it. Check with the city; they can give you the information on a particular property of whether where it's at with that, and then make your decisions based on that.
That's right. And as hard as it may be to believe for some people, the city does actually have the property owner's best interests in mind.
Yeah, for sure, right? All they want is
Mm-hmm.
safety. They want neighborhoods that are, attractive and
That's
aren't
right.
overcrowded. So it does come down to zoning and density and all those things too in the city's plans. And the city wants to make housing available for people. So, they'll work with homeowners as much as possible to get the best density that a neighborhood can support.
That's right. So as we wrap things up, there apparently are rumors that interest rates could be coming down. Do you have any predictions as to where the Southern Alberta real estate market is headed in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, things are steady. People are moving in. The rates, at least, are holding pattern right now. Talk of them coming down. So, yeah, I would say it's still it's encouraging for Southern Alberta. Prices should do well and fairly stable. And Lethbridge and area has always been a very stable market. You know, we don't react quite as drastically to the oil, but it still affects us, but less proportionately and less quickly. So yeah, it's a good time right now to own a house. It's a little more challenging to buy, but still some good opportunities, and the prices are still reasonable in relation to other communities. You look at the prices in Vancouver, Toronto, and it's just not affordable for a lot of people. So great place to live here in Lethbridge, and
Yeah.
exciting times.
Jeff, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for
Thanks for the
being here.
opportunity to discuss with you, Michael. Have a great day.
That was Jeff Reimer. He has been a Lethbridge realtor for 30 years with Royal LePage.
There are a lot of companies trying to come up with cleaner and more efficient energy. One of the most interesting types of energy being talked about right now is hydrogen. What is it? How does it work? We're going to find out from our guest today. He joins us now from Calgary, Dave Van den Asem. He's the Director of Clean Technology from the Hydrogen Center of Excellence. Dave, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Now, Dave, what is the Hydrogen Center of Excellence really all about?
Well, the Center of Excellence was set up about a year and a half ago now, maybe closer to 2 years ago. And it's designed to help integrate hydrogen into the energy system within Alberta, as well as provide some opportunities for low carbon energy exports outside of the province.
So where does your funding come from? Is it mostly from the government? Is it private funding?
We received $50 million from the government of Alberta to set up and operate the Center of Excellence through to March 2026. Of that money, we have allocated $38 million towards technology development, $10 million towards building facilities and testing equipment, and $4 million towards studies and public awareness and codes and standards support and development. We've received matching funding from Natural Resources Canada, our federal friends, for $15 million to support technology development. And we've received $3 million from our Prairies Economic Development Canada, our other federal friends, for an additional $3 million. We anticipate that we should be able to see projects, technology development projects primarily, that will add up to about $300 million or more. So there's some good leverage for an initial $50 million investment.
So Dave, with Bridge City News, we not only like to inform people, but we like to educate them as well. So let me ask you something. How is hydrogen produced? Does it mainly come from natural gas?
Well, we certainly have a lot of natural gas here, and it's abundant and inexpensive, so it makes a lot of sense for us to produce it from natural gas. One can also produce hydrogen from splitting water molecules. It's called electrolysis. So both are legitimate, commercially available technologies, and it really depends on where the resources are most abundant and available.
I've heard that hydrogen is potentially a renewable resource by a process that basically uses sunlight and water. Is that true?
That's the electrolysis process I was mentioning. So one can take solar energy, convert it to electricity, or wind energy, or hydro power, convert it to electricity, and use that electricity to split water molecules into their component hydrogen and oxygen parts. And of course, we take the hydrogen and use that for various applications.
So what kinds of things are we able to use hydrogen fuel for? Can we use it to power our vehicles, our homes, or even commercially?
Those are some really good options. There's hydrogen is best used where it's difficult to decarbonize through other means. And we're finding that the most traction we're getting, the most interest and the best opportunities are in transportation, especially heavy freight and commercial freight transportation, such as big trucks and trains. One can also use it for heating in residential and commercial applications. And we also have a tremendous opportunity to provide another low carbon export product because there are other regions around the world that are really interested in our low cost, low carbon intensity hydrogen.
Yeah, didn't Germany come knocking recently and talk to our Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, about tapping into some of our hydrogen here, and Trudeau kind of pushed them aside?
I can't recall the exact details of how all that worked, but I know that there are some natural benefits to producing hydrogen using the available wind resources, for example, in the East Coast, to electrolyze water and have a short trip to across the ocean to Germany, Netherlands, UK, other countries that are also interested in hydrogen. For us in the West, we're actually really close to, or reasonably close to, Asian markets such as Japan and South Korea, and there's quite a bit of interest from those countries in our low cost, low carbon intensity hydrogen.
So, Dave, how green really is hydrogen fuel? To what degree does it actually lower emissions?
Well, there's a number of different ways to produce hydrogen, and each one has its own carbon footprint, shall we say. And one can optimize that carbon footprint in terms of either capturing carbon that is produced during the process, or in some cases, not produce carbon dioxide at all. And so it really, there's a broad range. So here in Alberta, we're really good at capturing carbon dioxide and sequestering it underground. We have tremendous expertise in that area. We've been doing it for decades. So, so that allows us to use natural gas as a feedstock to produce hydrogen, capture the carbon, and produce low carbon emissions products. When we have abundant renewable resources, renewable power, and water, together we can produce hydrogen through the electrolysis process I mentioned earlier. That is also low carbon intensity. So there's lots of different ways to do it, and we have the ability to do all of those, really.
And we need, especially with the emergency we had with our grid recently, where we had to actually end up borrowing power from Saskatchewan here. Dave, do you think Alberta is in a position to be a global leader when it comes to hydrogen production? I mean, Premier Daniel Smith seems to think so.
Well, I happen to agree with her, and we are already Canada's largest producer of hydrogen by a long margin. We're currently using it for industrial processes, upgrading hydrocarbons or manufacturing fertilizer and other things. This is an expansion of that capability into new market areas that we're building. We are quite, because of our pedigree, our experience in working with hydrogen, we have some natural advantages over other regions in the world that can't produce it or don't know how or don't have the expertise or infrastructure. So I think we have a great position to be able to take advantage of this wave that's coming.
So how can we maybe take things to the next level and tap into maybe other markets around the world and really expand our hydrogen production?
Well, one of the biggest volume opportunities that we have for hydrogen production and use is by exporting it as a product. One can export hydrogen either as the gas, which is two hydrogen atoms together as a molecule, and ship that as a gas, or we have other forms that contain a lot of hydrogen and no carbon that we can also use. Ammonia is one. It's a liquid at warmer temperatures than hydrogen liquefies, and so it's a little easier to move. We know how to move liquids quite well. So there's a lot of different ways to get it to the markets we need.
I've heard some concerns, Dave, about the safety of hydrogen use. Are there any risks involved?
Well, there's risks involved with everything, but I think the key is to ensure that we have a rigorous and well put together set of codes and standards and regulations, which are there to ensure that safety is being maintained and preserved. We have been using natural gas for decades, and we do that very safely. And we can do the same thing with hydrogen. There's already, hundreds of kilometers of pipelines for hydrogen in operation, have been in operation for decades. As I mentioned, it's an industrial chemical. So it's being used safely. It's more expanding those codes and standards and regulations to encompass these new market opportunities. And so those processes are in place. A lot of smart people working on that, trying to get that set up. So we're very excited for that.
But what are some of the potential dangers when it comes to hydrogen use?
Well, hydrogen is a gas like natural gas. So if it's anywhere near flames, then it will ignite. It's the same as natural gas. So we want to make sure that it's controlled and it's contained, and that we have the appropriate detection mechanisms, the appropriate safety mechanisms in place to ensure that these things are under control.
So I understand that the cost of producing hydrogen fuel is sometimes part of the challenge. What kind of progress is being made in this area?
Well, there's some great progress being made currently in terms of getting larger scale production developed, so that we have those economies of scale. So the larger the facility, if it's a centralized facility, the lower the unit cost, or the lower the cost per kilogram, for example, of the hydrogen produced. And so there's Air Products announced earlier their $1.6 billion blue hydrogen hub in Edmonton that's going to produce a tremendous amount of hydrogen that's going to serve the industrial market as well as some of these emerging opportunities. And several others are planning, announcing, and in development with projects as well. There's also a number of low carbon emissions ammonia projects that are also being announced and contemplated in the province. So it's going to be a tremendous boom in economic activity in the province should all these projects go ahead.
Let's circle back to hydrogen and vehicles as a fuel source for just a moment here, Dave. If we see continued investment in hydrogen and if the price comes down, what kind of a timeline are we talking about to see proper infrastructure for fueling stations put in place to make hydrogen vehicles a reality?
There's a lot of work being done in that area. A lot of the fueling station providers are starting to work their way into the ecosystem here, which is great to see. A lot of interest. And if one produces or builds a fueling station, there has to be vehicles to fuel. So we have an interesting situation where we're starting from scratch with a new industry, essentially. And so we have to make sure that we're doing it in a way that provides the certainty of demand, so the producers are interested in producing the hydrogen, but the end users are there as well to use it. So we have to build that up in pieces, and that's where you see a lot of the hydrogen hub activity in the province. We have the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub that's established, and they're doing some great things in there. There's one fueling station operating currently in Edmonton. It's commercial, not generally for the public yet. It's because it's for the big trucks. But we are in discussions with, and there's a lot of planning going on for other hubs in the province. And they will be building their own infrastructure as well. And then when we get the interconnectivity of those hubs, then we have a network. And that makes it a whole lot easier to go from location to location and have certainty that you have fuel there waiting for you.
I remember my wife's family had this old Chevy Suburban. It was a gas-powered vehicle, and they converted it over to propane. And that was quite interesting, when they went down to the United States touring, especially the West Coast Highway 101, they had to make sure there was a gas station that actually had propane so they could fill up. I wonder if we'd see something like that when it comes to hydrogen. Just convert it over to hydrogen, no big deal.
Well, yeah, these things evolve over time. The same conversation we were having a little while ago about electric charging stations, and the infrastructure started to show up more and more locations. We're starting to get it integrated into building design, into different applications here. So we're starting to see more and more of that. But in the early days of electric vehicles, not too long ago, folks had to do the same thing. They had to go, okay, well, how far can I get with this charge? How long do I need to stay there to recharge it? And now they're becoming more common. So it evolves over time, and it starts with these discrete chunks of development.
Now, what about the agriculture sector? Does hydrogen maybe have the potential to be a game changer for that industry as well?
Well, I think there's a couple of different ways to look at that, and it's potentially very exciting. So one is providing a decarbonized fuel that can replace diesel in particular for the heavy duty applications that are again hard to decarbonize. So there's one opportunity. The other opportunity is in the production of hydrogen. There's a couple of a handful of organizations in the province that produce bioethanol that can then be converted into hydrogen. So SBI is one. I've got the other name here. Azola Hydrogen's another one. There's a few of them out there that are doing it. So the nice thing about that is ethanol is easy to transport and store. Much easier than hydrogen. So they do that, and then you produce the hydrogen on demand at the fueling station. So it's a real smart idea in a lot of ways.
Dave Vandenassem is the Director of Clean Technology with the Hydrogen Center of Excellence. Thanks so much, Dave, for joining us today from Calgary.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and thanks for watching.